Harris.
Wow.
Well, there she goes again.
Trump
It's a
is
lie.
so
Our
She's
country
doing
fought,
an
and
insanely
they
good
wanted
job,
it back
too.
in the short
Definitely
as possible.
outperforming my
The
expectations.
states in Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening.
It's
Make
over.
America
It's
great
over.
again.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
She's going in for a
Harris.
handshake.
Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Oh!
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
The
Good
gambler
evening.
came
We
through.
are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast.
I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris.
No, that's so bad, dude.
So
she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there.
No, the moderators already said it's a
under
sales
their
tax.
Administration.
It's great framing.
We are going to take
on
in
tariffs.
billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
Oh my God, she's like, I can be more of a China hawk than you.
Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short.
So far,
and you
very
said,
good
quote,
for Kamala, very bad for Trump.
We need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates. Because they're radical. The Democrats are radical. You're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Wow. Well, there she goes again. Trump it's a lie. Because we've gotten our country apart,
insanely
and they
good
wanted
job
it back
too.
in the
Definitely outperforming my expectations.
The states, no. I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban?
I'm not in favor of an abortion ban.
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans.
This will have down-ballot
and
consequences.
It ended up being a total catastrophe.
Trump is literally pointing to gridlock and deliberate obstructionism. All she needs to do in this situation is be like, yeah, that's why we need to vote for Democrats down ballot.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. in all fairness. J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie.
Oh, yeah.
It's another
keep
lie.
talking about abortion.
I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF.
Guys,
and the other thing,
reminder. This is like if Kamala said, I'm a leader on the border.
Will she allow abortion
Remember
in the 8th
that
month,
for when
9th
immigration
month,
comes
7th
up.
month?
No one believes you.
Okay.
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
I don't want to come across like I'm glazing, but that was bars. She called him a narcissist and also separated him from her fan base.
There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase. Make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
He's debating them already!
Again, Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation
don't help him, David
proposal
Muir.
That the Vice President has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher.
The Hasanabi
Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you.
He's not
answering it. You know, the crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down. You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
Crime is down.
Despite their fraudulent statements that they made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable
Yo,
for
hit him on
sexual
immigration.
assault.
Stop hitting
and his
him.
next big court
Hit him on
appearance is in November
policy.
at his
Stop.
own
You did
criminal
enough direct
sentencing.
attacks. Hit him on
And
policies. Hit
let's
them on
be
the crime.
clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history.
Drill, baby, drill.
Because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil.
And she made a single
As
point
it
that
relates
isn't
to my
preaching to the
values,
mythical
let me tell you,
conservative
I
undecided
grew up
voter.
a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking
abortion.
mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer.
The other side? You mean Congress members?
Shot her. It's a disgrace.
Not even a single. Mike
But
Pence wasn't even hanged.
This group of people that have been treated so badly, I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, "Oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet." That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted?
Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago, her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business.
What?
That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say,
he's doing
debunked.
it.
Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do.
Hey, guys,
and
remember when I said neo-Nazis are very fine people?
We would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills.
Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these
Just
pieces of video.
I
didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We
man.
didn't. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election. It leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person.
Americans love Viktor
Smart.
Orban.
Prime Minister of Hungary. They said,
way.
why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. The biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I
up.
think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held.
Here we go.
Americans
Israel dick
among them.
riding.
Vice President
Get
Harris,
ready.
in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis.
She's losing Michigan.
Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
Lines, dude.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one.
Yes!
She hates Israel.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back.
God, what a journey we went on. Yo, Edinger Mentum, you can unmute. What an absolutely insane. Okay.
Yeah, she didn't bring up that he has the morals of an alley cat. She's throwing. This is
I know.
Like
she also, did you notice that she didn't say we beat Medicare, which was weird because that was a powerful bar when Joe Biden deployed that one. Or
not bring up the immigrant deaths during the abortion question. Classic mistake. I don't know what she was thinking.
Yeah, I found that very odd. So, okay, right off the jump, really strong start. I will.
Yeah.
She outperformed my expectations by wide margins. Okay.
Yeah,
there was a lot of.
I was really blown away in the abortion thing. That was legitimately really impressive.
Yeah. No, she did a fantastic. Like she was not doing the classic like Mamala, coconut tree Harris at all. Straight to the point.
Laughed. She's hardly laughed at all.
She laughed one time. There was a couple moments. I am unimaginably frustrated with the immigration stuff for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I think that is like that's really bad to just leave on the table in general, because Trump is just like getting increasingly insane on this issue. At least point it out. Like the least you can do.
He's been groipified.
Yeah, he's so groiped up. Like the way he's talking about the Haitians eating cats. Like I can't believe he just straight up said that.
Did you see the Eric Erickson thing where he was freaking out? Like, congratulations on getting this shit on national TV, you morons.
Yeah, it is unimaginable. But like honestly, again, it is up to Kamala Harris at that moment. Like you can't rely on David Muir's sexy ass every time to offer you a goddamn lifeline every single moment that the debate is occurring. You know what I mean? And he did. Yeah. His sexy ass was out there being hot and also doing a lot more fact checking than I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, I've actually really liked them. I've been like pleasantly surprised, bringing up the number of Palestinians who have been killed. Like I didn't expect that. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it was shocking. Jake Tapper would never. Okay, Jake Tapper would be like what, 10 Palestinians that maybe died and they deserved it. That's what he would say.
Yeah, they killed themselves actually.
Yeah, Dana Bash would be hitting both of them on not being sufficiently pro-Israel. So that is actually shocking, the decent amount of moderation that's occurring here. But yeah, the Israel dick riding portion was awful. It was disastrous. It was expected. And I think that it will, in my opinion, it will have electoral consequences. I don't know how you feel about that. We could talk about that after the fact.
Yeah, I think that like it's just a larger thing that like with her team's up mindset, because she's kept all the Biden people. They just feel like for some reason they can't ever meaningfully break from Biden. I feel like the ingredients were here for her to have a bad performance. Like a lot of her lines are canned. A lot of the like bait on Trump looks kind of corny and like a non sequitur if he doesn't respond to it.
Yeah.
But
and
like
he ate it. He ate it every time. Even the Charlottesville one. Like she would do throwaways, bro. She would just like kind of drop random ones in there, and he would be like, "Nope, I remember that, and I'm gonna address it," which is shocking. It is worse than I thought, and I think like the failure point, like he was already even against Joe Biden, if you know, if you recall. But like Joe Biden obviously was cratering so hard that nobody even paid attention to how bad Trump was. Having said that, like you really saw it from the jump. But it absolutely fell apart after the crowd size. Like people are leaving your campaigns, I think, was like the pivotal moment of the debate. Because
he's been seething. He's been seething.
Yeah, he hasn't stopped chirping since then. And I think like a lot of Americans just care about optics overall. And if you were like will this motivate more people to go out and vote for Kamala Harris? I don't know, because like there isn't a lot of like policies past the opening monologue. But overall, I mean, she absolutely looks way more professional. Like she is reminding people how narcissistic Donald Trump is, and showing like what a normal president would look like in a way that even Joe Biden wasn't able to do after 2020.
It's just like, I mean, I'm like trying to keep track of like the pulse, like with like just like searching stuff on Twitter. If you search Celtic Shaq, everybody's saying that he looks like Celtic Shaq. They're saying he's an insult to Celtic Shaq. Oh, there it is, it's back.
Yeah.
Let's see if he can clutch this out.
I think it's Joe.
Debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight.
Another Hasanabi line.
Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers.
I hate to do this, but also the ad break is coming right now. I'm sorry.
Europe. I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason?
It's Kamala.
He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years
it's
to
not
Putin.
Biden,
Hasn't
it's
spoken
Kamala.
to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, And what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Oh!
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia
Trump will look better
invaded,
on this, I think.
tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself.
He has no policy,
Days
though,
later,
so it
I went to
doesn't matter.
NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century.
67.
But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American
Yeah, that wasn't a bad
diplomacy,
idea.
where we invite
Sorry.
and receive.
And that's why Joe Biden
respected
followed
world
along with it.
leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate
What are you going to do? Not bring the Palestinians to Camp David?
responsibility
Freak.
of the President of the United States to
This point
be
is stupid.
commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and
If Trump
demeaned
was smart, he'd be
members
like,
of our military,
"That's how you do deals."
fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo.
18 months. I mean,
It was a very good
Abdul,
agreement.
his house
The
was a
reason
prison,
it
dog.
was
He was
good,
in prison. You
it
took him
was-
out of prison.
We were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers.
You literally
we wouldn't
took
have
them
left
out of prison.
many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have
What
left.
is going
We
on?
wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
That's bad.
I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then
Why
I
are
read
you-
that she was
That's
black,
so bad.
and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times
State landlord.
calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5, took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that.
President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. It's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding
this is where she could pop off
the value
way harder,
I bring to
on the
this
policy front.
is that
This is where
access
she
to health
gets
care
undecided,
should
like
be
people
a right,
who are on the couch,
and not
to
just
come
a
out and vote
privilege
for
of
her.
those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past is
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries.
Dude,
and then
every Trump take is a conspiracy, unfounded.
Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did he get
this motherfucker is supposed to be talking about climate right now?
This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An
Oh
historic
my
night, this
God,
ABC News presidential
bro.
debate from Philadelphia. Back.
What the What, okay, that shit was hella boring. The second half was so boring. The first one was like, the first half was like way more powerful than the second half. I'm not gonna lie. They front loaded that shit pretty hard, and they kept the Israel stuff to the end too. Honestly, not great. Okay, not great overall. Second half was definitely weaker. Trump is just still continuing to devolve. Every conversation just like goes on a tangent. I think there was some moments where Kamala Harris was also flubbing a little bit. What do you think?
She didn't try to bait him at all in the second half, which I thought was kind of weird. Like that went like kind of like weirdly smoothly. He sounded terrible. I think that like right now, like the poly market like odds for like who won the debate is like 95% for Kamala, which like I think will be true. They usually have like the intra, like the one big thing that I was like really kind of shocked by, that I was surprised that she didn't really hit him on. He got baited on the Central Park 5. He said they were guilty. Like, God. Yeah, that was one thing he got baited on, I guess.
For better or for worse, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are just like kind of going and doing exactly what they've been doing. Her Israel stuff was just like obviously dog shit. I think that there was my analysis on this, and I've been saying this for quite some time now, is that on the issue of not the Afghan withdrawal necessarily, that was a powerful moment for Kamala Harris, like actually standing on that. Even though she flubbed the first half. I will say, like, I think Donald Trump presented himself as a peaceful dove against Hillary Clinton in 2016, and a lot of voters responded positively to that. Obviously, Clinton had a lot of additional baggage on top of everything else, but he was not even able to do that this time around. I think that could have been 3 points that he could have hammered. He could have been more moderate on immigration. He could have been more moderate, like a little bit, like dialed it back and didn't do like conspiracies and stuff. And I think that would have been more appealing to like a broader audience. But he went way too hard on immigration. I think that's going to backfire on him. He went way too hard on, like, he kept doing this. He kept doing this thing. Like, he even did it on abortion, where he would just like obviously lie, and would in an opportunity where like he could technically jam up Kamala Harris and be like, oh, well, do you want third trimester abortions? Like, what point would you ever restrict abortion if you would? Like, that kind of question would be
support Roe. That's the line. They don't ever like say, oh, Roe means you have this sort of type of restriction. So that maybe kind of doesn't.
But because he was lying about like post-birth abortions and shit, that like he wouldn't even be able to hit like a good line of attack on Kamala Harris on that front. And I think that that similar attitude presented itself even when he was talking about Russia and Israel Palestine. Like, in a lot of moments where he didn't really talk about Israel Palestine like throughout this entire process, throughout the past 11 months. Whenever he did, he presented himself as like the guy who's going to end it, right? The guy who's going to end it all. And I think at this point he should have probably had like some way of ending it. Like, he could say something beyond like, nah, I'm just going to end it.
That would have worked in 2016, I think, when like the whole concept was like, oh, I'm like this person, I can get shit done. I'm like this competent like outsider. That was like a really big underrated part of his appeal, I think. And that shine has gone off after he's already been president. Like, when he has to like kind of say like, oh, half of my administration was morons, but like I'm gonna do it better this time. And also, like, I don't talk with JD Vance about anything. It's the Celtics Shaq phenomenon. He's Celtics Trump.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, he fucked up on 3 strong suits that he could hammer Kamala Harris on. By going too hard on immigration, he fucked up on that front. And I think like he lied far too much, which kind of cooked him a little bit. I think he also fucked up on
fact checkers. They're mauling about ABC.
Everyone is going to maul about ABC. The debate is coming back, but I think that it was good that they actually did moderate the debate. You shouldn't be able to get away with lying that much on national television on a presidential debate. So, fuck everybody.
Statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight 2 very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
Bro, this is your opening statement. What are you doing? I mean, closing statement.
They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question.
This is reverse 2016 in some ways.
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me.
Viktor Orban
They
is
call
laughing
me.
at us.
We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President
That's your
Trump,
closing
thank
statement?
you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution
Bruh,
Center.
Watching here in the U.S.
That was so bad, bro. All right, what are your final thoughts, Eddie Mentum?
Yeah, well, this is like I can't stop thinking about. I have the concept of a plan. I don't think that she necessarily like did what I felt like she needed to do, which is like really defining who she is beyond kind of like platitudes and sort of just like general kind of concepts and also just rampant hawkery. But I think like I don't think for the people out there who are like really like concerned about who she is and why they should vote for her against Trump, I don't know if she really accomplished that. Just like I didn't feel like the DNC accomplished that. I do think Trump reminded a lot of people why they want to like her, because it's worth considering that she's like gotten back into a lead entirely off of people wanting like a Democrat to vote for against Trump. And people don't necessarily see Trump as much. He's on Truth Social all the time. He's a bit kind of quarantined in his own little kind of world where like the people eating the pets makes sense. But this is one of the rare opportunities where they see him, and he reminded people not just why they don't like him, or they're terrified of him, Like the idea of somebody being president is like, it's always been scary.
Yeah. So, couple things. One, we have some undecided voters immediately that were being focus grouped. And under 30 for Michigan, Jonah says, I don't know what he's talking about in terms of his false claims that immigrants are eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. So that's cool. Brilliant move from Donald Trump being extremely online and flubbing that big time. One thing I will say is this. I think you and I will both agree that the American population has already made up their minds on Donald Trump. Maybe he can eke out tweak the margins a little bit with like young men, conspiratorial minded people that don't actually show up on polls, right? Like he's had the capacity to do this before. He's done it twice, as a matter of fact. He's done it twice where he's like brought forward people that normally are not necessarily polled well, right? Like people that normally don't go out and vote.
To an extent, there are some explanations for why the polls were off in 2016 and 2020 beyond just like that factor. In 2016, the pollsters didn't weight by education, which was why they got it off really poorly. And in 2020, you had a situation with COVID lockdowns where liberals were staying at home and were always answering their phones, so they were disproportionately represented in polling. So neither of those things will be the case in 2024. The polling was accurate 2 years ago. I don't think that it's guaranteed that he will overperform the polls, but his team seems to be banking on it, and I don't think that's really wise.
Yeah. So here's a couple things I want to say about this, right? I'm not saying this is a success method. I'm not saying that this is like a successful method for Trump. I'm saying that this is what he's going after, in my opinion. I think that that's like with the RFK endorsement, Tulsi Gabbard, like he's trying to carve out like what remains in the demographics that might not have like a solid opinion on a dude who was president for 4 years, right? And it's going to be hard, especially because he wasn't just the president. He was a hyper telegenic president. There was a lot of opinions in either direction. My point is, it seems as though Donald Trump, and I think this is reflected in the polls, like he's locked in. Like his audience is locked in. His voters are locked in. He might stand to win here and there a couple people in the margins. He might stand to lose a couple people potentially. That's less likely in my opinion, because if they're committed to Donald Trump at this point with maxed out name recognition, then they're probably invested and they're probably committed. It seems to me like Kamala Harris was looking to, like you said, show who she is to a broader audience of voters who might have voted for Joe Biden or might have historically voted for the Democratic Party or is going to vote for the first time ever, but aren't necessarily enthusiastic about going out and voting for Kamala Harris. And on that front, I think she absolutely showed herself as like a reasonable adult, what like the Biden team thought Biden would be able to do, and he obviously failed to do so because his brain was leaking out of his ear. But in terms of like activating a lot of those people, I think you have to meet them where they're at, recognize their material conditions, recognize the problems that they're experiencing, and offer them like a decisive policy prescription, a solution to their problems. And I think personally, she didn't do that much.
No,
there
I
were
don't
moments
think so either.
Yeah, there were a lot of moments, I think, where she could have done that, especially when they were talking about healthcare. Like, that's such a gimme. Trump is literally chirping. Trump is chirping about how Kamala Harris wants to give everyone healthcare. Like, that's
concepts of a plan.
And she's just sitting there, like, shaking her head furiously, like, no, I don't want Medicare for all, I promise.
I don't want to support the thing with 60% approval.
And it's like you're so stupid. This is like another Israel style situation where she is directly at odds with the broader electorate. Okay. Like directly at odds, like remove your head from your ass. I said, if the goal for tonight was to simply demonstrate for the Harris campaign was to simply demonstrate competency and remind people how narcissistic and incompetent Trump is. She put up LeBron numbers, but the goal tonight was to also get voters enthusiastic about voting for Harris. On that front, progressive policies would help. I said 8.5 out of 10. That's my assessment of Kamala Harris. As far as Trump's performance, it's like minus 10 out of 10.
It wasn't as bad as Biden, but it was like in the same area code. It was like in that ballpark.
It was like, I mean, Biden is like historic. That's like once in a lifetime failure, right? I mean, he had to drop out. That's how bad it was. But he ate every bait. He was extremely online. He was disheveled. He literally leaned into like all of the worst instincts, like all of the worst things that people point to him about. And he even leaned into like all the issues that he should be avoiding, like that cost him the midterms, even like cost the Republican Party the midterms, like loser shit. Bro, he said at one point, nobody on the other side even died on January 6th. The other side was your Congress. Okay?
Yeah, and the cops.
Like, and Mike Pence and cops, Capitol Police. What the f are you saying? It's like the only Ashley Babbitt died. Nobody on the other side even died. It's like that's crazy, man. That's an insane thing to say. Like, I often talk about how silly it is, like how much hyper focus like liberals put on January 6th. And that's, I think, part of the reason why it's like reflected well in the polling. Like Trump is a threat to democracy. Why? Because that's the key thing that Democrats can't shut the fuck up about, right? So obviously it's going to be reflected in the polls to a certain degree. I wish they would have that same energy for immigration in terms of counter messaging, but they don't because they're stupid. Anyway, ultimately Trump just keeps bringing back. It would be like if Kamala Harris did the Joe Biden thing, regularly bringing up how, like, I don't know, undocumented migrants are like doing rapes or something. You know what I mean? It's akin to that.
Shit. Yeah. The healthcare stuff I was gonna say before we cut to the walls and Vance stuff, like it's always kind of frustrated me because like during the like in the moderators did a better point of bringing this up than like honestly Kamala did. During the Trump era, during his presidency, he reached his lowest points in like approval over his tax bills and over Obamacare. Those were really, really unpopular. Obamacare is like broadly like a consensus kind of bill.
Yeah.
Like Obama himself is very popular. I mean, I get like kind of the like saying, oh, we're going to expand and protect the Affordable Care Act, but like it's like the exact opposite of how they push on immigration, where like they're totally defensive and reactive about it. You could make healthcare into a big issue this election. That would be really helpful for you. You could like talk about how Trump has concepts of a plan or whatever, and how like you want to do a public option. You could force this and make like the issue better on your terms. Don't make it just the thing that's about the immigration and the economy. Make this like be assertive, like change it like to be about what you want it to be about. But like they just have a fundamentally reactive and like reactionary perspective towards it that doesn't work. Like it's just very passive.
Yeah. I genuinely cannot comprehend how he like failed to be normal on immigration, a strong suit, and like didn't even talk about didn't even talk about the economy. He rarely talked about the economy in that the whole point of Trump was to be moderate. Right? Like was to seemingly look normal, more normal than you've ever seen him before. That's what his like advisors keep fucking telling him. And they're like, don't attack Kamala Harris on race and stuff. Like just be a little bit more normal. You know what I mean? Be a little bit more normal. Maybe you can pick up some fucking voters on the sidelines. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are angry about the economy. Like you're beating Biden on the economy. You're beating Kamala Harris on the economy. And it's crazy that like he just could not take a deep breath and just be a goddamn adult. And he just insisted on eating every bait possible. Incredible.
Yeah, it's the worst time for him because the momentum was kind of shifting in his favor. You had the discussion and the polling moving towards more being about how Kamala doesn't have a plan, how like she doesn't have like any real clear policies, how she didn't inspire confidence at the DNC. And there were some inklings of him getting towards that point where JD Vance tried to do where she just said that she only has platitudes, which I think is a real problem for her. And she did that a little bit during the debate where she really didn't have too many specific points, but he totally made it about himself, just talking about like, I don't even know who Abdul is. I don't even know who that is.
I know who it is. That's the funny story. He's the Taliban chief, right? Trump actually
guy who's the head of the Taliban.
No, he evac'd him out of a Pakistani prison and brought him to the United States of America, which is why it's really funny when he just keeps saying like, oh, I sent him a photo of his house. It's like, no, dog, you took him out of jail. Like he was in prison. You got him released from prison and you brought him to Camp David. You did not send him a picture of his house unless you showed the photo of the Pakistani prison he was in. So that's like another thing. That's another lie that he loves repeating for some reason.
Yeah. This is an insane reference, but that moment reminded me of that YouTube video where he plays like Call of Duty with Walt Jr. People who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. But like when he said like I got your house, like I'm like it sounded like he doxed him.
Apparently, Taylor Swift just endorsed Kamala Harris on Instagram.
Oh my God.
It's Jover. It's Jover. Is
She's
that
feeling
a
the news
meme?
cycle from him.
Oh, she did. She said register to vote. Like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on issues at hand. It stands to these candidates take.
Childless cat lady. It's over.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's the picture of her with a cat.
Oh my God.
He's gonna beat Don Jr. with a shoe
Bro,
over
all
this.
it took was for her to hug a Trump supporter and then have like the entire Swifties on Twitter rip her ass and be like, you only cared about politics when your career was failing. She was like, no, I'm sorry. Actually, I love politics. It's my favorite thing to do.
I like that she kind of implies here that she was like undecided until she watched the debate.
Yeah. Recently, I was made aware that AI of me falsely endorsing Donald Trump's presidential run was posted to the site. Oh, recently you were made aware. Sure. Okay. It really conjured up my fears around AI and the danger of spreading misinformation. It brought me to the conclusion I need to be very transparent about my actual plans for this election as a voter. The simplest way to combat misinformation is the truth. I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she's a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we're led by calm and not chaos. She's even doing the PR moves. Like she did watch that debate, or at least her PR people watched that debate. Let me tell you, okay?
Yeah, they said we're backing. This is like the best indicator for like Kamala like so far because they are not going to back her ass until like unless she's like a clear shot to win. Like she was not endorsing Biden until Biden was leading by like 10 in the polls.
Yeah, this is like the Waffle House Index. You know what I mean? for predicting elections. Like people will look at like Polymarket or whatever, or like betting odds, but like this is the real careful and considered, calculated decision maker here. Okay.
Yeah. She has so like a Bloomberg journal about.
Ooh, she likes Tim Walz. She doubled down on Tim Walz. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate at Tim Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ plus rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades. I've done my research and I've made my choice. Oh my God. And the choice is yours.
The policy page. She had to drop the policy page.
That's what it was. She's a real policy head. She's a real policy head. She was like, yo, honestly, yeah, once I read the policy page, it was over. You know, this was it for me. Yeah. When I heard Kamala Harris is going to combat Iran, no matter what it takes, I was like, that's my vote.
Yeah.